Well, hello, everyone. I'm Guy Davidson, Director of Adjunct Faculty Development at Rowan College of South Jersey. Today, I have the great pleasure and honor of being joined by Dr. Kathryn McFadden, who was named our 2020 Adjunct Instructor of the Year. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thanks, Guy. It's good to be here.
So let's just jump right into it. You were named Adjunct Instructor of the Year for the Gloucester campus for 2020. Kathryn, tell us a little bit about what that might mean to you.
Well, I mean, obviously it's an honor to be recognized. I've been at Rowan for a really long time, and I never quite understood how all these awards things worked. But yeah, honored for sure. Yep, appreciate it.
Kathryn, it's funny that you asked how the Adjunct of the Year is actually selected. My understanding of the process is that you are first nominated by your students. So it's, in my opinion, one of the highest honors an educator could receive is having their students not only appreciate what they do, but take the time to take it to the next level and make sure that their instructor gets recognized for it. So any thoughts on that now that you know that it was your students who brought you right to the forefront?
Well, of course, that makes it all the more an honor. Because when I was in college, I'm not sure I remember who all my teachers were. Back then, we didn't fill out evaluation forms or think about, how good an instructor was in the classroom. It was more like, did you pass the class or not? Yeah, so great. That's great news to understand that. And it's good for everybody else that's watching this to know that too.
It certainly is. So in thinking about this very prestigious honor, I mean, there's so many adjunct instructors who go unrecognized, and certainly you being chosen for this award, you're representing a much larger population. Is there anyone in particular that comes to mind when you think about who may have helped you to get to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously everybody helps in the Rowan community. The secretary type people, help you. The people that clean the classrooms help you. Adjuncts, your buddies in the adjunct office help you. I mean, people in the cafeteria feed you. It's pretty endless. But if I was to name like one person who really helped me at the beginning of my work at Rowan, it would be John Hensey. He was the person that hired me, and I could just go to him. He was had a kind of open door policy. You could walk in anytime or give him an email, and he'd be there answering your questions. And this was earlier in my teaching career, so I really depended on him a lot for troubleshooting issues with me and giving me ideas.
So here you are now. You just described a situation where you were learning the ropes, trying to figure out your way around, and someone helped you. Here you are now with a PhD. Tell me, what advice might you have for someone who's possibly just starting out as an adjunct?
When you're adjuncting, you're usually working in multiple institutions. I mean, often, I know I do. I don't just work at Rowan. I've never just worked at Rowan. So you've got a lot of balls in the air. You're trying to figure out the policies and standards for one institution versus another. So it's a lot of work to be an adjunct. I don't know that I have advice other than just be good to yourself and forgive yourself when in the times that you screw up, because you will.
It's certainly a difficult job to do well, from the perspective that I hear often that in some institutions adjuncts can be treated as second-class citizens, that sort of thing. And I can tell you that is not the case at Rowan College, and it's because of people like you who are willing to share your expertise. And just kidding, earlier, Dr. Ruffino and the rest of our deans are also very, very helpful. So that said, obviously teaching, learning, the business of education has looked very different quite recently.
Mm, mm.
How have you managed that? And maybe after you tell us about that, maybe a little bit more about what you and your students have been up to.
Okay. Well, the transition to Zoom over the summer, I really liked the way Rowan handled like all the classes or instructional opportunities to learn it. So I entered the fall feeling pretty much prepared for the whole thing. But I didn't know how it was going to go. And much to my surprise, it went much better. Holding Zoom classes on Zoom went much better than I anticipated. I partly because I was prepared, but also I think at least for the courses that I teach, which are philosophy courses and art history courses, that that there's a kind of intimacy in just looking at the screen and looking at details of things and having the kind of discussion that those classes require. Although very different, they're both about ideas in a way. And I, I had to come up with like strategies for making sure all students in the classroom were involved and not feeling overlooked or, ignored because they weren't in the physical room with me.
Hmm.
So I can say good things about that. I mean, it was a pleasant surprise. Of course, there's always more to learn and to do, not to saying that everything's nailed down. I think the other thing that I've learned that's important is that, maybe not try to, I used the expression this morning, bite into the meatball with my religion students, because I had to give them a pretty substantial lecture on the first chapter in our textbook. And I always think, oh, I got to get in there, I got to get this out, and then they need to know what to do. And today I realized, like, oh, I don't have to cover all of this in one day. We can take tiny bites of the material. We don't have to shove it all in. I'm very conscious of Zoom fatigue. I think that's a real thing. I think instructors get it. I think students get it. Yeah, I guess that's the main thing I want to say, that I think for me, the kinds of courses I teach lend to a kind of Zoom lends to a good thing in terms of methodologies and practices.
So going into this, did you consider yourself to be a technologically savvy person?
Yes.
So this transition for you was probably a little easier than it was for others that maybe didn't have the ability to jump right on a computer and figure their way around. That had to help in some regard.
Yes. I think the big difference is meeting with students online, face to face, as we are now. That was the difference. How that brings in all kinds of other issues and questions. Should students turn on their cameras? Should
Yep.
they? There's like all these little things. But yes, yeah.
So was there anything in particular about the online experience? You touched on some of it. Uh, if you can think back to what you've been through over maybe the past year as we've dealt with COVID and the restrictions and being
Mm.
online, uh, did anything jump out at you as, wow, this is something that wouldn't have happened if we weren't doing this in this format?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the positive experience of it. Because we're in a pandemic and there's so much anxiety around everything, right? Income, emotions, political stuff, all that. But and when you're in a Zoom classroom, there's I think it's a time of less distraction for college students. They're not worried about, is their friend here? What are they wearing? Did they get something to eat? That kind of stuff. Are they hungry in class? There's a kind of yeah, because it's more focused in a lot of ways. All these other distractions. I think that's one of the benefits of the pandemic, if we're going to call there any benefits to it, is that people leaned into projects maybe a little bit more. Leaned into the subject matter a little bit more and gave it more thought that they might have if they were running around, worrying about a parking space on campus and some other things. And because of that, maybe it's a great time to go to college, and really focus on something. And I really believe that my face, on a screen with these students, it lends to a kind of personal interaction, even though we might be in a classroom with 30 other students that we would not have in the classroom.
That's true. We're going to remain largely online for the foreseeable future, with the hopes of, maybe in the fall being able to return to a more typical sort of situation. But for now, what are your plans going forward?
Gosh, just keep on keeping on. you know, yeah, I do teach both. I was one of the early instructors at uh, RCSJ, wasn't called that then, to teach online. So, certainly online classes, and then the Zoom classes for now, of course. It'd be interesting, I think, to see if after the pandemic is, abated for, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's really going to go away for a way long time, but it'll be interesting to see, how institutions adapt to possibly students that want to keep learning in a Zoom kind of format. And is that possible? I know I'd be on board for it. Um, I think it's got a lot of exciting possibilities, and we're all learning as we go here. So just looking forward to many more years of teaching for Rowan. It's been a
Well,
pleasure, and I've learned so much.
so we've talked about the pandemic, how it's maybe impacted our teaching. Now, you're someone who has now, as a result of all this, you've taught in all the different formats that our college has to offer. You've taught face to face, in person. You've
Hmm.
taught online courses, which are certainly set up very differently. You've
Hmm.
even now taught live online. Uh,
Hmm.
can you tell me a little bit about maybe some of the differences between between the three formats from your
Mm.
perspective as an instructor?
Mm. Well, from my perspective, it has a lot to do with how well get to know the students too. I mean, uh, in an online format, that kind of learning is more about self motivation than having to be in a classroom or in a Zoom meeting at a certain time. Students that do best online are self-starters in a sense and able to follow directions very well. I don't think online learning, as wonderful as it is exactly for everybody. I think that's something the student has to think about before they enroll. um, and I think that in class meetings, of course, that's the traditional thing, and that's where I started at Rowan, because online learning didn't come along till a couple of years after I had been started already. I think that might have been 2001. I want to say it was January of 2001. And and then the Zoom learning, of course, you don't even have to worry, as I might have mentioned earlier, you don't have to worry about finding a parking spot or what you're going to wear to class. It's a kind of as is situation. And they all three, have something to offer the student. And I think to fit in with what the student needs, and how they learn, because not all students obviously learn the same way. I didn't. I'm a visual learner. So I
However,
probably I wouldn't have done well in online classes back, 20, 30 years ago or whatever it was. Yeah.
one of the things I think it's important to point out to folks is that when you're an adjunct instructor, you're typically doing something else other than simply the class or two you might be teaching for us. Uh, so I understand that maybe you do some of that elsewhere.
Yes, I've taught at other 2-year institutions, colleges, and universities. Um, and currently at any institution I'm working for, also, everybody's gone Zoom live classes for the most part, but I'm also continuing to teach online. That's correct.
So now someone is watching this video of ours for the first time, and they here's Dr. McFadden, Adjunct of the Year. I'm not sure what class she teaches, but those things that I saw her describing on screen look like things that were fun and something I'd like to learn more about. How do they find you, Dr. McFadden?
Well, for Rowan, I teach art history classes, art appreciation classes, and a number of things under the umbrella of philosophy. So that would include Philosophy 101, ethics, and comparative religions. I'm kind of a hybrid animal in a sense in terms of my education, because I have an MFA from the University of Pennsylvania in painting and mixed media, but I went to get my terminal degree in it's actually a kind of combo degree in aesthetics and philosophy. So that explains my strange variety. I don't think most people could say they teach that kind of a variety of classes. Yeah.
Well, and maybe your approach during each of them, which is what might set you apart from so many others. You do such a fine job of representing our adjunct instructors and our instructors at RCSJ as a whole. It's not everywhere that you can go to a community college and learn from a PhD. It's not everywhere that you can go and experience the same kinds of things that you can at our campuses, both Gloucester and Cumberland. They're truly unique and special places that cater to the needs of the communities that they serve.
For sure.
Kathryn, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Any parting words for the folks that are going to be watching this later on?
Not really. Just make good choices is what I tell everybody these days, from my own family to everybody else. You know, we just have to make good choices.
What a deep statement.
I teach ethics, so there you go.
And some outstanding advice for everyone. Yep. Well, that's all the time we have. Kathryn, again, I appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon on RCSJ Today.
All righty. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.